The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television. Major support for Compass is provided by the ongoing support of the Leo P. Flynn Estate of Millbank, South Dakota. Additional support is provided by the Southwest Minnesota Private Industry Council, promoting Southwest Minnesota as a place rich with opportunity. Come for the jobs, stay for the lifestyle. More information at swmnpic.org.
Hello and welcome to Compass, a production of Pioneer Public Television. I'm Les Heen, your host for Compass. This is a weekly discussion of public policy and important issues facing our viewing area. This week, we will discuss how disability services work in our region, and we'll find out where people can find better access to services in southwest and west central Minnesota. First, Pioneer's Laura K. Prosser takes us to Eagles Academy in Madison, Minnesota, and that's where the local elementary school has started a program for kids in their school district with developmental disabilities. Here's Laura's report.
Many schools in our region don't have the tools to deal with special needs or developmental disabilities in the classrooms. However, Lackaparra School District not only has the tools, they have the department devoted to these needs. Eagle Academy is the brainchild of Kip Stender, principal at MMN Elementary. Him and Janet Larson, an autism licensed teacher, works hand in hand with these students. Kip, Janet, why don't you tell me a little bit about Eagle Academy?
Well, we have the Eagles Academy to offer programming for students that have, special needs, and they're not easily met in the classroom. But we have a goal that all students are included in the regular ed classroom and then meet their needs as needed in or outside the classroom.
So, what kind of need did you guys see that made Eagles Academy necessary?
Our district has a large number, for a small district, of students that we identified through evaluation that fall on what we call the autism spectrum disorder. So when we identified a higher number of students that we want in the regular classroom but needed some individualized, more specific, and even what we might call specialized to their unique needs, that instruction needed to be tailor-made to meet their needs and then increase those skills so that we could make a regular ed classroom be a success for them and their peers.
So tell me a little bit about tailoring this program. What goes into tailoring a program for special needs?
Well, first of all, we always sit down with the families and discuss what would be the best fit for their child and their needs, and we do whatever it takes to meet those needs, and even then some. Our goal is every child's unique and special, and so we do the best we can to meet their needs and in the inclusive environment of a school.
It took a couple of years for us to get that going. We met as staff with our psychologist and social worker, our special ed staff, and certainly our administration, and we just developed this program that would include, as Kip mentioned, the evaluation process, but also then the programming process and the related services that we could give. So with developing that idea came the program, and with the program then, as we met and developed this core program, this whole building has embraced this program, and it's really a neat thing.
Now, in 3 years, it's been a bit of a trial-error learning experience, correct? Tell me how this program has grown and changed just in these 3 years that you've seen it.
To me, it's changed in that throughout the district, whether it's high school or the other elementary, which is in Appleton, Minnesota, and certainly Madison as part of our Lackaparra Valley School District, people are aware that we have these really neat kids, and we have a really neat program here to service them, and they're accepted as is. They've got, same feelings and same goals and dreams in life that all of us have, and I think that's the change, is that it's become a really a grassroots and accepted part of a school system.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. All education is based on requirements and curriculum. How does that meet and address in Eagles Academy?
We use a variety of research-based strategies and curriculum. Our kids don't fit into the scope and sequence of our regular ed curriculum. There's pieces of it, and that's certainly what we're trying. For example, some students in first grade are in what we call Daily 5, and it's like 5 different stations, and they might work with the teacher, they might work on writing the words, they might be listening to a story on headphones. So they partake in the things they can in the regular ed curriculum, yet the research-based, more specialized curriculum is used for instruction like within the Eagle Academy or outside of that classroom, so that we can try to, I'm not going to say the words catch up because that's not real for even us as regular ed learners. I think that it works though in helping them close the gap in certain areas.
Further the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Understandable.
Now, to end our discussion, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this academy prepares them for the future of their education and just communicative skills to work with in the general population?
Well, I think for the students to become as independent as possible, and that's one of our goals, is to help them do that to the best of their abilities and capabilities. I think when you can do that, everybody has different abilities, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and all these little kiddos have strengths, and they can stay confident and stay positive, feel good about themselves. Then at some point in time when they're ready to pursue that part of their life where they want to become a professional or whatever job they would like to do, they have that ability to do that.
The general population doesn't always understand what school districts do. Mm-hmm. They know that we teach kids, yet this is a great way for them to see that there are other programs out there that work not just with regular kids, but for their special needs kids. And as Kip just mentioned, our goal is that they can be independent and that they can be a successful adult in the real world, and for some kids get married, have kids of their own, because they will. We start at a young age in their life. We've worked with some kids as early as 9 months that have been identified, or 17 months, and we get them into the school setting at age 3, as we call it, early intervention. And what a difference it makes for these kiddos who can get started early, and by the time they are at a transition age, 14, 15, 18, what a difference it makes in their lives and the parents and the families' lives. Yes.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Kip, Janet. And that's it for us in Madison, Minnesota. I'm Pioneer's Laura K. Prosser. Back to Les in the studio.
With us now to talk about regional efforts to improve disability services in our region, we have 2 guests. Phyllis Reller is with the Grant and Pope County Social Services. She's a supervisor there. And we also have from the Southwest West Central Service Office, that's a long title, we have Corey Ryan. Corey, Phyllis, thanks for joining us on Compass.
Thank you.
So, there are so many ways that we could talk about disabilities and services, and there have been so many changes. But I'd like to talk first about, what the two of each of you do in your respective positions. So if I could start with you first, Corey, about your work.
Yeah, I work for an educational service cooperative. So I'm a director of special education, which is similar to an administrator, but I oversee just the special ed part. And I actually work in 15 school districts. So I have a tiny position in each one of them, because obviously I'm not there every day. But my region is on the southwest part of the state, so down in the Windham, Worthington, Pipestone area. So I have 15 schools of varying sizes in that area. And generally I help out with questions that they might have, difficult situations. I'm kind of a connection between them and MDE when we have
Which is Minnesota
Department of Education,
okay.
Yes. And so a variety of tasks within that role as a director.
Okay, great. Phyllis?
Well, I'm a supervisor for people with, I supervise the programs that support people with developmental disabilities or other disabilities. I supervise the waiver program, which is a funding source to provide supports for people with disabilities. I supervise adult protection and licensing of all the programs. So, and I do that in 2 different counties, Pope and Grant County. Typically, counties can only afford, small counties can only afford 1 supervisor. So we have partnered with a neighboring county in order to specialize a little bit more. And so we do now have 3 supervisors and have broken up the tasks. So I get to work with 3 people over in Grant County that I supervise and help them with their program areas, and with 8 in Pope County. So.
Okay, so with the type of work that you do, of course, you see a lot of different sort of cases that you have to work with on a regular basis, but what are the services that people are seeking the most? And I'll start with you, Phyllis.
Well, from our angle, from young families, we see requests for respite care, just something to give them a little bit of a break, or personal care attendants, which can help with some of the personal cares of their individual that they, in their family, like the bathing or the grooming and all of those kinds of things. That's what we get most for requested and for children. Those children, but there are families that struggle and have kids with really high behaviors, and those families, they want the respite, the breaks, but sometimes they want longer breaks, and so getting them into foster care for short terms preferably, because we try and support those families so the kids can stay close to home or in home. With adults, a lot of support with getting them to work, place to live, some independent living skills, which we also do a lot for teenagers, work with independent living skills and preparing them for living out on their own. So,
Corey, in your work?
I don't know if I would necessarily, the services are sought after, but really it's a wide range of disability areas. There are 13 recognized disabilities, and so a student needs to qualify for services to receive them within the educational setting. And there's a wide range of, some are very acceptable. If a student has trouble with some of their sounds, that's okay. Parents can accept that a little bit easier. Some of the more severe needs are a little bit harder sometimes, and so we tackle some of those same real high behavior needs. And again, we really try to handle those within the school setting. So sometimes that takes a lot of effort by those districts, those small districts that have limited staff, and trying to handle those needs. So it really is a wide variety of needs from articulation of speech to medical to behavior needs, a wide range.
I'd like to pick up on the point about limited staff, because of course there are a lot of challenges that people can have, but it sounds like having a limited staff, is that one of the biggest challenges that you have in helping people?
I would say in general, we do a lot of hiring of staff that maybe a school doesn't need a full-time occupational therapist in their district or a full-time school psychologist, but we would hire that position and then that's shared. And so those positions are very specialized. And in general, we have difficulty with those positions, as well as districts have trouble with special ed teachers. A lot of our districts are having to hire people on a community expert license, which means they have a 4-year degree, but it's maybe not in the area of teaching. So we have one teacher who said, I'm a marine biologist turned special ed teacher. And so some of our kids with the highest needs are being taught by people who don't have a lot of educational experience. And they're doing it, but they need a lot of support. And so that has been a real struggle for our school districts and for our agency.
Yeah. And so in West Central Minnesota, staffing, what are the other challenges that you face?
Oh, staffing is the biggest challenge for all of our providers, having qualified staff or quality staff. So we end up with a lot of families who are not getting their needs met, because the adults who are living in foster care and they have a 24/7 requirement becomes their priority, and if they don't have enough staff in those homes, they pull from those other programs to cover there. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our families end up missing out on services. There's a lot of challenges, I think, but the staffing is the biggest thing. Social work, there are not enough social work slots in the colleges across the state to cover what we even need to hire in a year. We had a huge hiring frenzy a little over a year ago when the state increased requirements and lowered caseload sizes. Hennepin County alone had to hire over 100 social workers. We had to hire 2. Another county, in the other county I work in, was 1. But trying to find those people with those qualifications has been really a struggle.
So in other words, it sounds as if there was a change in the service requirements due to changes in federal or state law, and then that in turn led to a sudden spike in the demand for staffing. And I'm sure that's the really hard part. You can't staff up quickly.
Right.
especially if you don't have the trained people.
Right.
Right, and training takes so long. For the people that I work with on the waivers, I would say it's at least a year before they understand the basics of their job and can move pretty independently. There are so many moving parts to that position and so many little tiny things that are very complicated. It takes at least a year to have a staff fully trained, and then when the process of getting them hired even can take up to 2 months, which is very challenging.
And what about the difference between the services that an agency might be looking at for kids versus adults? Are there people who are maybe working in one part of the field and then they move into helping out with kids, or how does that work? Because I know there's a difference sometimes between services for kids and services for adults.
Well, I think at this point in our county, we have some specialized children's mental health case managers, and we have adult mental health case managers, and then we have case managers who work with people with developmental disabilities, but that's the whole age spectrum from birth, so I think some in their 80s. So there isn't a lot of movement that way. Movement internally usually comes. Child protection is a high burnout position, so a lot of times they'll move out of that into one of the other positions.
So I know, Corey, you're obviously dealing a lot with schools, but I'm thinking about the fact that as you work with people who might be interested in working in the field, because clearly you want more people in the field.
We need more people, right?
What would you say to them, to the people who are considering this? Why should they go into the field?
It's a very rewarding profession, and there's so much to do that you don't even realize. I think about myself when I was in school, and I was going to be a special education teacher, and I was going to get a double major in special ed and general ed. My intent was going to be a general ed teacher, but I was told, get your foot in the door with special ed, but get out as fast as you can. And I thought, that shouldn't be the advice that I'm getting. So we need to work really hard to say to people, this is a rewarding field. And there are roles that can fit any number of interests that you have. If you're into data, maybe there's a behavior analyst position for you. If you're into kind of how people think, maybe you're a special education teacher. If you're thinking about assessments, maybe you're a school psychologist. But I think we need to work at helping people in junior high, high school, understand disabilities a little bit and understand what are the different fields or different roles that you could take within the field. I didn't even know my current role existed when I was in school. So I think we just need to work on educating those people and supporting. It's a tough job, but there are a lot of tough jobs out there. So I think we really need to say, yeah, we're up for the challenge and we want to go into that field.
With so many people who I've talked to about rural staffing, they often talk about growing their own.
Yeah.
That we're not necessarily going to get people from other places. So is that really where you think the future is?
Yeah, we need to talk to kids at career fairs within our schools, and we need to encourage them to come back to the area and come out to our schools. If they end up going to college in Mankato or in the metro area, we often don't get them back. So we really need to talk about at the very early stages, what could they do back in our area? How do we really see them being used within our areas? So
it's clear that there's a staffing need. There are more people who should go into the field. I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit now to those people who are home and they know someone, a child that has issues, and they're trying to figure out where do they go. So sure. If they believe that there's a developmental issue, where should they start? And Corey, I'd like to start with you. So what's the sure. first step for a parent or a caregiver or a relative who believes that there's a challenge?
Sure. When you look at the initial needs, you kind of want to think about the age of the child. So if the child is under age 5, you want to be working pretty closely with your doctor. Your doctor is often a great resource to say, I know as I take my son to the doctor, they say, is he doing this, 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 this? So we do those well child checks to make sure that they're on par with what they're supposed to be doing at that age. And doctors can be really helpful in saying, do you know what you need to do at this age? There's also a website in Minnesota, it's called Help Me Grow, and it's a great website that lists developmental milestones, what should I expect of my child at a certain age, And then that's also a point where you can make a referral. If you have any concerns at all about your child, you go to the website or you call a 1-800 number and you say, I'm just wondering if this is okay, if there are things we need to be doing for my child. And they automatically connect you with the district that you live, and then that district reaches out to the parent and they go through, do we need to screen the child? Does the child need an evaluation for special education? So that's a really great, easy tool that can be used to find those students who are 5 years or younger.
And Phyllis, as we go into the last minute or so of this, your advice, where to go?
Well, I would hope that whether it's your doctor, your school, or your county social service agency, that you'd be able to get connected with all of the services that are out there. What I like to share with people and families is to don't look at our social workers at the county as social workers, but look at them as service coordinators, because their expertise is identifying services that are out in the community and getting them connected and really developing skills so that they can be more independent. So get connected with us sooner rather than later, because funding is limited, and the sooner we know about somebody, the more we can be planning for future and even working with independent living skills outside the school setting.
So local providers, helpmegrow.com, okay? Good tips. With that, I think we're going to have to leave this because we're out of time. Corey, Phyllis, thanks for joining us on Compass.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week on the topic of disability services in rural areas. Compass producer Laura K. Prosser will take it from here and end this week's episode with the next installment of the Compass Literature Corner. Thanks for watching.
As part of the new segment to the show called the Compass Literature Corner, we will be talking to local authors and writers who have had an impact on this region, or whom this region has had an impact on. Today we have a man who has found a love for South Dakota despite not being a native. So much so that he has written a book centered around a small town, living both past and present. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to say that today's guest is New Jersey native, but South Dakota resident, Richard Skorupski. Richard, welcome.
Good afternoon.
So, Richard, tell me a little bit about your book, The Frank Stanbauer Story.
Frank Stanbauer is my fourth novel, and all of my novels center around an imaginary town called Helen, South Dakota. Frank Stanbauer is unique because it's a story of a 97-year-old man, the oldest man in town, and the town historian for that reason. And I tried to tell the life of the Midwest through him as he looks back on his life to things like the Dirty 30s, World War II, and the atomic bomb, and other things that were significant in his life. I also mention a lot about his family, and just raising a family in a small town and through some of the good times and the hard times.
So what inspired you to write a book like this based on a small town?
I moved to Middle America 12 years ago, and I absolutely fell in love with Middle America. I wanted to write something because I've always wanted to write books. I started out with the book Flyover County. Why? Because it's a culture here that is so unique. It doesn't exist on the East Coast. It doesn't exist on the West Coast. It exists here. And I wanted to write a nice story about nice people, and that's how I got started doing this.
What about that surrounding and that environment made you pick that stage?
Again, I have to try to explain to people who don't live here. Where I came from in New Jersey, you locked your car to get out and go to the mailbox. Here you go to the church lot on a Sunday and half the keys are hanging in the car. It's a completely different culture.
So now this book follows the life of one man. How was creating a character mainly through flashbacks? What went into that for you?
Again, I wanted to tell the story. I can't write the history of the Midwest. I didn't live here. I didn't learn it in school. But I wanted to tell that history. And doing it in fiction allows me a lot of artistic license. For instance, in the book I talk about a blizzard. Well, that blizzard did not happen to happen when I put it there. It happened about 10 years later, but hey, it's fiction. You get away with it. So I wanted to how did people think in 1934? How did people think in 1942? Yeah. How did people think when they first heard the video, duck and cover, because the atomic bomb was going to go off at Ellsworth? Mm-hmm. You know, what did people think? How did they interact? How did they talk? And it took me a lot of time, a lot of research, and a lot of talking to people a lot older than I am to get the flavor of that. And that's what I wanted to do with the book. And I did it through Frank Standbauer, through the life of a 97-year-old man.
Not to mention through the life of a school teacher. So he was more than willing to sit there and explain why he was thinking the way he was thinking, or why this was happening. He gave you context that maybe you wouldn't have gotten if he hadn't been a history teacher.
If he had been a truck driver,
yeah. So how did you cultivate and pick which flashbacks to use?
In the first book, Flyover County, I mentioned that Frank Standbauer was part of General George Patton's walking tour through Europe in 1945, so I had to put that in.
Minus getting his foot crushed.
Right, right. But I had to put that in. I wanted to talk about the dirty 30s, and what better way to do it than working with his father, who was a merchant with a store with house accounts that he knew were never going to get paid, and still helping out a family in need and putting it on the house charge, even though he knew he'd never see a dime. The favorite part of this, one of the favorite parts of the book that I write, is when the husband and the wife and the two kids come in, and they've got the bandana around their heads, but they're not here to rob the place. But they've got the bandana around their faces. But the man says, "We've lost the farm. We're packed up. We're leaving. But I'm going out to this little town in Nevada called Las Vegas. Probably never amount to much, but they're building a dam there, and I'm going to get a job, and I'll be okay." And to have Frank think in the back of his mind that even though this guy just lost his entire livelihood, he still has a positive outlook.
He still has hope.
He still has hope. He's still going to do something for his family.
And this entire book is about hope. Hope faced with the dirty 30s and hope faced with old age. You know, even in the flash forwards, you got to see him finding new love, him living his life. So overall, it's a message of hope, would you say?
I think so. I think so. I like movies that have happy endings. I like books that have, you're reading through this, and as you read through, you can get 2/3 through, and you can see where it could go to a natural conclusion. I like happy endings. I couldn't do it. I could write it, but I didn't want to.
Well, wonderful. I feel like this book echoes the sentiment of many people from the older generations. I've heard them utter, and myself utter, "Where has the time gone?" How do you hope the book resounds with your audience? I'm
hoping that not only folks that are older can get something. We're actually trying to focus toward those who are younger than me, those who are one generation my junior, so that they can see. I've heard these stories. I've talked to people that lived in these times. But there's a generation coming up right behind me that doesn't know these stories and doesn't know those times and how it was to have a town that have all the paint scoured off the walls of the buildings because the wind would never stop. You know, those kind of things. People don't know this part. So I wrote it that way. My other 3 books, all of my main characters are in their high 20s, low 30s, somewhere in there. This is the first time I tried to do something with somebody who was older than me, and it made it fun.
I have to say, you did it well. Pick up Richard's book in stores near you. And that's it for us in the Literature Corner. Please tune in next week as more people, places, and issues facing our viewing area are discussed. I'm Pioneer's Laura K. Prosser, and may your compass always point you in the direction of a good book.
Major support for Compass is provided by the ongoing support of the Leo P. Flynn Estate of Millbank, South Dakota. Additional support is provided by the Southwest Minnesota Private Industry Council, promoting Southwest Minnesota as a place rich with opportunity. Come for the jobs, stay for the lifestyle. More information at swmnpic.org.